Hello, everyone. I appreciate you guys taking the time to listen to this presentation about our district religious policies. I believe it's important that we, over time, just constantly review how our policies line up to how the law is being currently interpreted. Um, you know, we are getting new Supreme Court justices, especially as of late. So that means that maybe um, the law is being interpreted a little differently, and I think it's important that we stay current with that. And of course, above all, our goal is to stay neutral. It's important that we don't favor one group over another, or we are discriminating. We need to stay as neutral as possible. Um, in my research, I read an article from the Pew Research Center which outlined these four basic student rights from the USDE, actually. And these student rights are that students may practice and exercise their religion independently. It needs to be very individualized. So students can't really coerce other students to practice their religion, believe the way that they do. Students may pray before meals or before school, things like meet you at the pole. As long as that is student organized and student led, then that is perfectly acceptable. Students may not harass others on the basis of religion. So they can't preach at other students. They can't like make fun of other students for the way that they believe. A specific example, um, in California, a student wore a T-shirt that was very offensive to members of the LGBTQ community, and it quoted some Bible verses on it. That would be harassment on the basis of religion. You cannot do that because that violated those other students' rights. It it was harassing to them. And then as a school, we cannot favor or disfavor one group over the other on the basis of religion. So if we have a drama club that forms and they ask to use the school facilities after school and we allow that, and if we have a some sort of religious group form who asks for the same thing to use the school after school, we cannot tell them no because they're a religious group. Um, and we also can't say yes to this one religious group, but no to the other. If we say yes to one, we have to say yes to the other. Um, so we have to give everyone equal treatment, secular or non secular. Um, Parents, if there's ever something that happens or in the curriculum that they might not be comfortable with, they typically ask for their child to be opted out of that. And this is usually things like sex education. Um, and typically that's not a problem. That's easy to do. But when it comes to things like studying evolution, a lot of parents have challenged that. And in the courts, that hasn't gone very well for them. The courts have determined that that's not a violation of their freedom of religion because it is a scientific theory and it is not taught as a religious truth. So the difference here is it's not a religious truth. It's scientific. It's educational, and it does not prohibit a parent's right to teach their child about their own personal religion. Teachers also have their own rights. Teachers retain their rights to freedom of religion, but teachers should refrain from acting overly religious. So teachers shouldn't preach at students. They should not quote the Bible at students. They should not pray over students. Um, Religion should be a very private thing. Um, Schools have discretion on teacher religious expression during school hours. Um, Teachers, at the very core, we are state employees, we're employees of the government. And of course, we know about separation of church and state. Um, our jobs as teachers, that is a government thing, but our religious preferences, that is a very private thing, and it needs to stay a very private thing. Teachers cannot proselytize to a captive audience. Students have to be in your classroom. They can't go anywhere else. We require them to be there, of course. So you cannot take advantage of that captive audience situation and preach truth at them. We have a lot of influence as teachers, and we cannot take advantage of that to further our own religious bias desires. Okay, that's not appropriate. But outside of official teaching duties, teachers are, of course, free to exercise religion how they choose. We can go to church, we can serve in church. If we have students can ask us to help them with religious groups outside of school, as long as it's outside of school hours, we can lead student religious groups. And we can also, of course, answer questions, but um, we cannot try to influence students. And that's very, very important that we try not to influence students on our beliefs. Um, Now, there's a lot of situations where religion would come up in our curriculums. The main thing is you need to refrain from trying to teach it as truth or a falsehood. Okay, teachers cannot promote a certain religion, or they cannot put another religion down. Okay, if you are legitimately studying that religion, you have to be completely neutral about it. That is extremely important that you're neutral. The student should not be able to tell what you think about that religion. Typically, this comes up in social studies or literature. Um, in ancient history, students learn about Judaism, Islam, Hinduism, Christianity, all kinds of different religions, and it's important that students learn how these religions influence that culture, but it is not should not be taught as truth or otherwise. Um, you can also read examples of excerpts from the Bible or the Quran or the Torah as examples of literature. As long as it is secular in nature, let's look at this from an educational standpoint. This is a quality text, things like that, then it should not be a problem. But as far as like a Bible study goes, teachers cannot lead students in study of the Bible as truth during school hours. That's not appropriate. Um, Again, the key phrase here is with a captive audience, you cannot take advantage of those students. If you read the Bible in class as a piece of literature, you cannot attempt to interpret the meaning. You can't try to preach it as truth. You're just reading it as a text, like you would any other text. But when it comes to Christmas and holiday programs, you need to consider the predominantly secular benefits, things like quality of the music. Does this have educational value? Um, you should probably try to, if you're going to include religious music, maybe you should include religious music from all different genres. Maybe if it's a holiday, there's Christmas, there's also Hanukkah, there's also Kwanzaa, and each one of those has its own different um, music for that time of year. And I think it's important that we are inclusive, and that will help us to remain as neutral as possible. Another area of debate is the Pledge of Allegiance, specifically the phrase "under God." This has gone to court several times, but the Supreme Court is still yet undecided if the phrase is unconstitutional or not. And I do not believe that they have any current plans to go back and revisit that. Um, there are a few religious groups, specifically like Jehovah's Witnesses, that will ask to opt out of the Pledge of Allegiance because pledging to the flag is seen as a graven image, and that goes against their specific religion. And that, of course, is okay that they opt out of that. Um, Students, of course, have the right to opt out of reciting the pledge on the basis of religion. You cannot force a student to violate their own personal religious beliefs. Another strong point in this is prayer in school. When is it acceptable? When is it not? A financial requirement actually is local districts receiving funds from the federal government. They have to certify in writing to the states that they protect a student's right to pray in school. If they do not do that, then they will not get funding. Okay, it's very important that we do this and that we take it very seriously because it is a financial requirement. Students can pray or lead prayers during school and on school grounds, but may not coerce others to join. They can't. That coerce means they can't make fun of other students. They can't physically force them to do it. It's they can be like, "Hey, we're doing this. Come if you want to." Okay, and this is not only acceptable for like one sort of prayer. You can do all sorts of prayer. Muslim students If they need to pray during Ramadan, that is also acceptable. Accommodations will be made for that as well. Students have the right to pray in school, before a meal, maybe before a test if they're feeling particularly nervous. That is their right. Teachers and staff, it's a little bit different. Staff may pray privately and silently, like before a meal, or maybe like during a moment of silence, but may not lead students in prayer while in their official capacity as a state employee. I think there's a difference there. You cannot be the initiator of the prayer. It has to be a student. And if you pray on your own, it needs to be silent. Hey, President Trump, he does affirm the freedom of religion aspect. Trump said that the government must never stand between the people and God. He's very firm about that. And he wants to encourage students and staff to exercise their free expression when it comes to religion. Um, and of course, he warns about schools losing their funding for teachers who do not protect that right. It's very important that we don't infringe that right for any student, whether we agree or disagree or cannot promote one group over another. We have to stay neutral. And to conclude this, there are some general considerations. The main point is there needs to be equal access. It needs to be neutral. It has to be equal. All groups, religious or secular, should be treated with equal favorability. The district cannot discriminate on the basis of religion or lack thereof. It needs to be completely equal, level playing ground. Um, I would suggest that our policy, if it does not already say so, that the district endorses and they should affirm a student's and teacher's right to exercise their religion while on the grounds that it doesn't infringe upon the rights of others. So, cannot harass students about your religion because one way or the other, it needs to be a mostly private affair because religion is such a private and individualized um, thing about a person. My standard correlation. I evaluated this situation as a potential legal issue and an ongoing ethical and equity issue. The school is responsible for providing an environment where students feel safe and protected. If the religious liberties of a student or staff member were being infringed upon, unwittingly or not, then the potential legal ramifications could be severe. It's very important that we stay neutral. I analyze the law as neutrally as possible. Neutrality is the only way the law can be applied fairly, equitably, and ethically. It is important to consider all possible religions or non religions, religious groups, when discussing how the law would be applied. I grouped portions of the law by topic, hitting important pieces. It was my goal to be succinct yet professional in displaying what each source said about how the law should be applied. I did not suggest that the school was infringing on anyone's rights, and I instead simply stated the facts. Too much meddling could easily put me in the infringement zone. I do, however, feel that it is appropriate to review curriculum, consider student after school groups, listen to any complaints with the sincerity that they deserve, and to monitor my building as necessary. It would be impossible for me to know if rights are being violated or upheld if I do not see the classroom environments for myself. Um, the topic of this week's module can, of course, be a sensitive subject. As a religious person, it is important that I am able to understand what my own rights are as a teacher or administrator, and to be able to defend the rights of others who are in my care. Because the interpretations of these laws are changing what feels like constantly, it can be confusing knowing what is and isn't allowed in public school. The material provided helped to provide clarity on this very dense subject. I personally feel like it is easy to turn a blind eye to injustices or infringements of this nature when it benefits your own personal beliefs. In the future, I need to be aware of my own personal predispositions and actively work towards neutrality in my decision making. Secondly, this assignment highlights the importance of staying up to date on educational law because how it is interpreted can change case by case. There's no shortage of court cases detailing decisions about religion in schools. We have not yet come anywhere close to exhausting this subject. And here are my references. I thank you guys again for listening. I hope you enjoyed this presentation.